We shouldn't require our kids to ignore their own hunger cues in order to force veggie intake or intake of any other food that we think they should be eating by using things like the One Bite Club. Welcome to our video all about the basics of the division of responsibility. So before we go on to the rest of the video, I just want to give a quick mention of Ellen Satter. She is the dietitian who originally coined and developed the division of responsibility. So all the work that I'm discussing is based on her original work and research in this area. So what is the division of responsibility? The division of responsibility is a food parenting philosophy that states you provide, child decides. So let's break that down. You provide. So that means it's the parent or guardian or whatever adult is caring for the child in that moment. It's their job to provide the child a healthy and well-balanced diet, deciding what to serve, where that food will be served, and when that food will be served. And then the second half of the division of responsibility statement is child decides. So it's the child's responsibility to decide if they're going to eat the food that's provided to them in that moment and how much of that food they're going to eat. The division of responsibility clearly delineates what is the parent's job when it comes to the feeding relationship and what is the child's job when it comes to the feeding relationship. And the goal with this is to develop trust between parent and child and help the child develop healthy eating habits and retain those intuitive eating skills that they have from birth in terms of listening to their hunger and fullness cues. So the division of responsibility is rooted in the parenting model of responsive parenting. So I'm going to read you an article about responsive parenting from a 2011 article from the Journal of Nutrition written by Black and Abood. The caregiver creates a routine, structure, expectations, and emotional context that provide interaction. So that's part one of this responsive parenting model. So it's the responsibility of the parent to set in place this routine and structure and expectations for the child, keeping in mind the child's emotional abilities and needs. So then part two of this is that the child is going to respond and signal to the caregiver. So whatever boundaries you set, the child is going to have an emotional response and tell you how they feel about it. Then part three, the caregiver responds promptly in a manner that is emotionally supportive, contingent, and developmentally appropriate. So then it's the parent or caregiver's job to respond back to the child in a developmentally appropriate way, again, implementing those boundaries and structures that they need. And then the fourth part is the child then experiences a predictable response. So when we put these boundaries in place, the child is going to have a response. Oftentimes it can be an emotional response. Then we need to then respond and react in a way that is appropriate, and then the child would then have an expected or age appropriate or predictable response. So meaning sometimes when we set a boundary, the child is going to have a tantrum, and that's predictable and that's age appropriate. So when we implement the division of responsibility in our home, we're implementing responsive parenting when it comes to food. So we're implementing a boundary or we're implementing structure in our home, but we're not doing that and completely ignoring a child's emotional and physical needs. We're taking that into account too and meeting those needs and allowing our kids to respond to that in an age-appropriate way and giving them the freedom to respond to that in an age-appropriate and healthy manner. We do want to recognize our child's hunger cues, and we want to encourage our kids to listen to their hunger cues. We don't want to be at their every beck and call when it comes to offering snacks or what we're offering for dinner. And we shouldn't require our kids to ignore their own hunger cues in order to force veggie intake or intake of any other food that we think they should be eating by using things like the One Bite Club or the Clean Plate Club. So putting this flexible structure in place does not rob our kids of autonomy. Rather, it gives them the boundaries and structures that kids need to thrive and learn. So kids need boundaries, they need structure in their life, and food and feeding is no different. Okay, so let's address some common questions when it comes to the division of responsibility. So probably the number one question I get is, well, won't they just eat whatever they want? And the answer to this is absolutely not. If we're adhering to the division of responsibility, it's your job as the parent or caregiver to decide what is served at a mealtime. So sure, they could eat whatever they want within the boundary of what you've served them at a meal. But this does not mean that your child is going to get to choose what they want for dinner or go to the pantry and get more food if they don't want what's served. Their option is eat what you've been provided or don't eat. In addition, part of the division of responsibility includes offering more food as your child requests and needs it to allow them to fill their bellies and listen to their hunger cues. But that does not mean offering them additional types of food outside of what you've chosen to serve at that meal. So will your kiddo eat whatever they want within the division of responsibility? No, as long as you uphold your responsibility by deciding what to serve them for that meal or snack. Okay, another question I get is, what if they just eat their safe food? So let's say you offer them a meal with lots of new foods and one safe food, one food you know that they'll eat. Won't they just, like let's say it's bread, for example. Won't they just eat a dinner entirely of bread? Well, first of all, that is possible, and it does happen sometimes within the division of responsibility, and that often can be your child testing the limits, especially if you're new to implementing the division of responsibility in your home. Your kiddo might be like, oh, okay, Mom says I can eat as much of this stuff as I want. Well, I'm going to test to make sure she's telling the truth and eat 4 slices of bread. So in that scenario, as long as your child is not doing anything dangerous, do allow them to continue to eat that food, because I'm assuming the food you're serving your child is safe to continue eating. And as long as you have enough food, allow your child to explore those boundaries, because you want to send the message that this is the boundary we've applied in our house and we are sticking to it, you and me both. So now, what if you're not new to the division of responsibility and your child just likes to eat their safe food a lot? So safe foods are a tool that we use in meal times to help a child feel comfortable at the dinner table. So oftentimes, picky eaters are scared or feel very uncomfortable when we provide them with a new food, but if there's a food on their plate that they like, we can use that as a tool to help them feel comfortable sitting at the table and being around those new foods. And I think you'll find a lot of times when we provide a child with a safe food on their plate and they start eating that, they start the process of eating, they feel comfortable at the dinner table, and maybe they then will feel comfortable exploring the rest of the foods that you have put on your plate. Now, if you have a child who only eats their safe food all the time, never explores any food, even though you've applied several different strategies used for picky eaters and used in feeding therapy, and your child continues to only eat a small number of foods, that is a time when you want to reach out to a pediatric dietitian and work one-on-one with them to help increase their diet variety. Okay, another question I get all the time is, I'm worried about my kid's weight. We're already deep into this sugar obsession, and if I allow my kid to have as much of a food that they want that I've served, like let's say I've chosen to serve chocolate chip cookies alongside with dinner at night, and I let them eat as much as they want, they're gonna eat 10 cookies and I'm already concerned about their weight, and then what am I gonna do? So this kind of relates back to the last question. We want to send the message to our child that we are adhering to the division of responsibility, both us and them. And so if you have a child who's not used to this feeding model, there's going to be boundary testing. So if you have a child who loves dessert, maybe you might even call them obsessed with dessert, and you start to implement the division of responsibility, which includes allowing them to eat as much as they want of the foods you've served, even if it's a sweet food, you likely are going to have some experimentation and boundary testing where they eat lots of sweet foods. Now, keep in mind that the division of responsibility is not an overnight fix. This is a method of eating that you and your child need to learn, and it can take a while for this to be implemented and for everybody to feel comfortable with it. Now, if your child is testing the boundaries like this, it's likely because they feel that they might not be offered sweets again. They feel that they're going to be restricted in the future, and so they need to eat as much of it as they can when they're given the opportunity, because they don't know when it's going to come next. And so if your child has this like dessert obsession, we're going to talk more about this in a different video, but just take heart that the division of responsibility does work with this kiddo. These kiddos, you just need to be consistent and it can take time. Okay, so can the division of responsibility work for kids with medical conditions? So kiddos living with conditions like celiac disease, type 1 diabetes, or food allergies, these kiddos can all do really, really well with the division of responsibility. Kiddos living with autism or ADHD or any sort of learning difficulties often can do well with the division of responsibility. Now, where there's kind of a gray area is eating disorder. So if your child is struggling with an eating disorder, oftentimes the division of responsibility is not the first approach you want to take. And in these circumstances, you want to make sure that you are working with a professional if your child has an eating disorder, because the division of responsibility might not be the thing that is appropriate at that current moment. But for the most part, kiddos with developmental delays and kiddos with medical conditions can thrive and do really, really well with the division of responsibility. All right, so what if my partner is not on board with this? Well, to be honest, if your partner is not on board, implementing the division of responsibility is going to be a lot harder, because we want to send the message to our kiddos that this is the structure of how we eat at home. And if your partner is implementing a different structure, it's going to be really hard for your kiddo to feel comfortable and have that level of trust that you want in the kitchen. So if your partner is not comfortable with using the division of responsibility, show them this video, have them check out my Instagram page, and consider that maybe your partner might be struggling with their own food or body insecurities, and those might need to be addressed first before you work on your feeding relationship with your kid. So I just want to hammer home that the division of responsibility is not a quick fix, but the benefits are incredible. The division of responsibility and developing a healthy feeding relationship between you and your child, and helping your child develop a healthy relationship with food and become an intuitive eater, that's a long game, but doing so is going to help set them up for a positive feeding relationship through the rest of their life. So I want to end this video with a disclaimer. If you're ever concerned about your child's health or eating habits, it's very important that you reach out to your medical provider, be it your pediatric dietitian or your pediatrician. This video is intended as educational purposes only. It is not intended to diagnose or treat any medical condition or provide medical nutrition therapy. For that, you'll have to talk to your pediatric dietitian or your pediatrician. So hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to subscribe and check out the rest of my videos, and I've got lots more to come.